have either emailed me or have spoken about following a meme I shared where I joked about people who, it was a kind of a new agey meme where they spoke about people waking up at 8:30 a.m. and some kind of higher spiritual calling or something like that. I made a joke, it's usually me snoring or something like that, but it's probably true. And but it is an interesting phenomenon either way, and it's just one that does deserve more interest than it gets. Of course, this is the witching hour. You have like lots of idiots who think that midnight is the witching hour. That's not, that's just from popular culture. The witching hour was always between 3 and 4 a.m. depending where you are in the world. In Europe, in the Northern Hemisphere, it generally falls bang between 3:30 and 3:33 a.m. Now, why is this? Well, there's actually a scientific explanation that flat earthers won't like. Because the Earth is a ball or an oblique spheroid, when you're on the back of it as it's rotating away from the sun at its furthest point of night, your brain changes into a different alpha state. It actually goes into a different state, and this is when also REM sleep often kicks in as well. It's basically what happens is the brain's cognitive functionings are compromised, is the word I'd probably use, and we're open to things that we're not normally open to in perception, in normal perception, and normal cognitive awareness. So it's kind of like not a million miles from taking entheogens or something like that. And you have similar experiences. Most of alien abductions happen at this time, fairy abductions, shadow people events, people having night terrors such as, you know, the hag and this kind of thing, old hag syndrome and all this kind of thing is 3:30 a.m. The firewall, the psychic firewall around us that protects us or limits our perception within this five sense reality is basically not working as the way it should because of the magnetic and the distance from the sun and other factors relating to the rotation of the earth and the fact that we're the furthest away from the sun you can get. This is why I believe, if you look at my videos on the psychedelic and shamanic experience of space travel, why space travel, what the real issue there was that they were having basically DMT trips as soon as they got outside the earth's gravitational field. And that's the real reason they never went back to the moon. And all the things like the Van Allen belt and all that stuff is all made up stuff, distraction for conspiracy theorists to put out there. But the real reality is they got up there and they saw that reality wasn't what reality is on this planet. Anyway, to change the subject, it's also an interesting time. People who say are alcoholics or something like that, drug addicts, will often got off the wagon at that time, 3:30 a.m. They'll wake up and they've been away from booze or drugs. They will often hop on them back at that time. Also, vegans, vegetarians have actually shown that they will eat meat at that time. They'll go to a late night restaurant or somewhere like that and go a McDonald's and have their cravings at that time. Also, people tormented by guilt and stupid decisions. If you've done something in your life that's causing you a sense of guilt or a sense of remorse or something like, shit, I wish I handled that differently. It's a catastrophe now. That will usually happen at that period. I picked 3:33. One, it looks good. Two, 3:33 is probably, you know, a number associated in Kabbalism with like dark forces, and also it's kind of like a good branding for it. But it will happen between 3 and 4 a.m. usually, depending on where you are in the earth and in a particular hemisphere. Excuse me. And I've got a bit of a cold. And this is also factored in by the fact that the earth is not perfectly spherical, and there's also things like cosmic rays will affect it. It's almost like the cosmic rays are somehow involved in it, because when you're the most protected by them, and you have like the Earth's magnetosphere, and you in between them, and the planet in between them, is when these events happen. And so it is an interesting thing. Now, the sort of scientific mind would say, well, they're hallucinations caused by cognitive faculties that are failed during this event where the earth is on the other side, where you're actually between the Terminator on both sides, the Terminator of dawn and the Terminator of dusk. And yeah, that's a very plausible scientific thing. If you know me and you watch this channel, you actually know that I believe that these things are real, that these entities are actual beings. What they are, where they're connected to, other than directly wired into human consciousness, I don't know. But the 3:30 thing is real. Now, often before it happens, people will hear loud banging noises in their head. They will have this is not always common though, but this is a common one. And it often happens to women more than men, which is really interesting. And that's all, maybe women's physiological physiological condition is different because they have the babies and are hormonally different and other things like that. And also women post-birth often have problems with iron in the blood not being there. That would be heavily affected by magnetic fields and magnetic pull. But also, very common with women. Anyone who's mentally ill, usually it happens around that time. I find psychotics on the internet who attack me. Say you have like a psychotic who's leaving, a psychotic truther who's leaving abusive comments on YouTube channels. It will nearly always happen at 3:30 a.m. Observe them at certain times. If you get up at Facebook at 3:30 in the morning in your time, you will often see that's when people are posting videos of animal slaughters or beheadings and sex crimes and things like that. All the wackos show up. And that's because, again, it's part of the same process. The cognitive integration is broken down due to the magnetic fields of the Earth being compromised by the distance you are from the sun in terms of your own body. And this is why it happens. So a sensation of banging on the head will happen in women, and they'll often wake up and they'll have kind of worries. They'll worry about their kids, they'll worry about their families, they'll worry about their future, their relationships. They will have sensations of, all people will have sensations of falling out of their body. That's a very common one, just like falling out of yourself. A voice will call you. I get that one a lot. In fact, it's often a dog barking, which is very interesting when you think of the moon card in the tarot. I often get, before I wake up at the 3:33 a.m. thing, I will hear a dog barking. And there's no dogs in my neighborhood here, and it's not outside, but it's the same. It's clearly inside my dream world. That's where the barking originates from. And I hear the dog barking as clear as anything, and then I wake up. And that's another one. People wake, the old hag syndrome that will happen at that time. People sometimes will wake up by their name being called, Mary, that kind of thing. So it's very common. It's not something to worry about. If it happens to you, don't worry about it. You're having a common human experience. It will pass, and this is past. And this is like, again, with the tarot, you're probably in the middle of the moon card, and you're waiting for the star to arise. The star represents hope and the chance of new beginnings, and that's when you wait. That's why the Scandinavians call it the blue hour, right before the dawn comes and the birds start singing. It's almost like when we become cognitively human again. It's so interesting. Stuff is a hugely interesting subject. But that's the reason, that the scientific reason for the 3:33 thing makes a lot of sense. But that doesn't distract from the fact that it's actually also betrayals happen at 3:33. It's an interesting one as well. If like someone's ratting out somebody in a gang or something, they'll often go to the police station at 3:33. If somebody regrets and remorse usually manifest enormously at that time. If you've hurt somebody, if you realize you're in a situation where you actually did something terrible to someone, you weren't thinking straight, the remorse and regrets will fly into your head. If you're a member of a gang, also allegiance switch at that time. You'll often have these sort of weak kind of cook men who, professional nice guys. I'm your friend, who will sort of like have a kind of a momentary trauma at around 3 a.m. They wake up and then decide to defriend all their previous friends and go on to their new things. These are the same types who become Jehovah's Witnesses at the drop of a hat. When they're working in charity, become born again Christians. They'll jump from Truther to SJW. They're just completely unreliable people. And it's usually 3:30 a.m. where they switch and shift as well. They're also extremely dangerous because totalitarian regimes are built on the background of the backbone of these things. This is why, police investigation officers in departments, and you have things like night court, they're awake all night. You're going to probably get a conviction at 3:30 a.m. easier than you would in the middle of the day, for the simple reason you're dealing with someone whose cognitive integration and psychic firewall is not what it is. So the 3:30 thing, and I'm calling it the 3:33 a.m. thing, is an enormous topic that doesn't get enough serious thinking. It's definitely related to spiritual and supernatural things. Unfortunately, like so many other things like this, the New Agers think it's like, you're being called to a higher power. Nah, it's much deeper than that. It's much more interesting than that. But also, this is why magical workings are very effective at that time. If you want to do, summonations and invocations, that's the time to do it. If you can get to some places like that. I mean, I've done it myself. It's actually an amazing time to do it, especially if you hang around and watch the sun rise on the horizon. You want to talk about being charged by a magical state. That's the time to do it. So that's it, and I will see you.